Chapter 35. The Opposite of Vertigo. The old queen led a prayer. "May our Lord take good care of this fallen hero. My lady-in-waiting Agatha was always there for me, to hold an unwanted bouquet of flowers, or pass me a bottle of hand cream, or take the blame for one of my particularly boisterous bottom burps." As she tried to lay her friend to rest by closing her eyelids, Agatha woke up with a start. "You poked me in the eye!" she protested. "You're alive!" exclaimed the old queen. "Yes, of course I'm alive. Now, for goodness sake, help me up." Alfred, Enid, and the old queen hoisted Agatha to her feet. "Actually, I am feeling a little dizzy. Can I lie back down again?" "There isn't time!" snapped the old queen. "Alfred?" "Yes, Grammy." "Search the guards for keys." With all his strength, Alfred rolled one of the guards over and found a set of old iron keys on his belt. "Here," he said, holding them up. "Jingle, jangle." "Excellent work," she replied, and her grandson beamed with pride. The old queen and Enid held onto the laser guns as Alfred led them to the door at the end of the hallway. It bore a sign. "Clock Tower." Alfred put a key in the lock of the door, and success! Click! The door opened. Alfred tiptoed inside. Whatever the opposite of vertigo is, the boy instantly felt it as he looked up the endless flights of stairs that led to the bell. There were 342 steps. He would never have been able to climb that many steps before, but now, somehow, it felt possible. He surged ahead, and with heavy hearts the old dears followed him. They had to go as quietly as they could, and it was likely there would be more armed guards stationed higher up the tower. Nearing the top, they passed the giant clock face. It looked as big as the moon, and as bright as it too, illuminated as it was against the inky sky. For a moment, Alfred became lost, marvelling at it, before realizing it was only a couple of minutes before 12. There was no time to lose. They pressed on, nearing the room that housed the bell. As predicted, 2 more members of the Royal Guard stood by that door. "Give this to Agatha," whispered Grammy, as she handed her laser gun to him. Alfred fumbled as the gun slipped out of his hand, and as if slow motion, it began falling down the stairwell. Silently at first, and then inevitably, clunk! Spinning, it hit the balustrade. Clunk! And again, clunk! Until it clattered all the way down to the floor below. Crash! There was an eerie silence for a moment, until the Royal Guards above leaped into action, blasting their laser guns down at the intruders. Zap, zap, zap! Chapter 36. Bong! Alfred and the 3 old dears clung to the wall of the clock tower to be out of the firing line at the guards. Zap, zap, zap! Woo, woo, woo! A deafening siren sounded. The game was up. "Let's run back to the submarine!" shouted Enid over the racket. "We can't!" said Alfred. "Never surrender!" announced the old queen. With that, she took the last remaining laser gun from Enid and charged up the stairs with the blaster in her gloved hand. Zap, zap, zap! From below, Alfred watched with a combination of horror and awe as first one royal guard, then another, plunged down the stairwell. Clunk, clunk, thud, thud. "Onward!" shouted the old queen, waving the blaster above her head as if it were a sword. "I haven't had this much fun since that man streaked at Royal Ascot." Alfred and the 2 ladies-in-waiting followed, gathering themselves behind the old queen as they blasted the door to the belfry open. Zap! Kaboom! The smoke cleared to reveal Big Ben in all its glory. This gigantic bronze and till bell, weighing more than a double-decker bus, was moments from being struck by the giant hammer that made it sound. 4 smaller bells chimed the little tune that always came before the dongs. Da-dee-dum, dum, da-dee-dum, dum, da-dee-dum, dum, da-dee-dum, dum. Then the bongs began. Bong! "To the hammer!" commanded the old queen. Bong! Next to the bell was a huge hammer. Bong! It sat on an arm that reached round the bell. Bong! And struck the bell mechanically. Bong! "How the devil are we going to make it strike 13 times? Asked Enid. Bong. I think I know a way, replied Alfred. Bong. The boy leaped up and clambered onto the arm. Bong. Immediately he felt how strong the reverberations were, and began to wonder whether he could keep holding on. Bong. His entire body was shaking. Bong. Still, Alfred shuffled down the arm. Bong. How many bongs was that? He called out. Bong. 12, replied Grammy. Now! The boy leapt down onto the hammer, forcing all his weight onto it. Bong! Yes! He had done it! Big Ben had struck 13 times! The signal had been given. The time for revolution was now! Alfred beamed from ear to ear, even as his head shook as the sound travelled through him. He leaped off the arm and back onto the platform. Excellent work, young prince, exclaimed Grammy, embracing the boy. Thank you, replied Alfred. That will have been heard across London. Word will spread throughout this country. The revolution has begun! Hurrah! Cried out Enid and Agatha, but their celebration was short-lived. The four turned round to see that they were surrounded by a platoon of royal guards, pointing their blasters at them. This was the end. Chapter 37. Hotty Botty. One of the guards gestured for the old queen to put her weapon down. The other three looked at her. Grammy was no fool and dropped the blaster onto the floor. Clatter! Another guard approached slowly and picked up the blaster, as the others all kept their weapons trained on the gang. Then one guard gestured for them to make their way out of the belfry and down the stairs. Soon, the gang of four had reached the narrow room that ran alongside one of the giant clock faces. The hands of the clock turned on a giant black rod, which they passed under as they walked. Agatha still had her walking stick, and Alfred had a bright idea. Ding! Let me borrow this, he hissed, and without a word she handed it to him. As he passed under the rod, he scrambled up his grandmother's back. Then, hooking on to the end of the walking stick onto the rod, Alfred swung forward at the guards. Whoosh! His foot clipped the helmet of the first one. Clonk! One by one, they knocked over each other. Clonk, clonk, clonk. In no time, they were lying in a heap on the floor. Run! Ordered the old queen, as fast as they could, which wasn't really that fast. They made their way out of the clock room and scattered the door shut behind them. Stum! Bang, bang, bang! The guards all hammered on the door, but Agatha grabbed her walking stick and jammed it into the lock, keeping it closed. Shunt! Looking down the balustrade, the old queen spied more guards now, waiting at the bottom of the stairs for them. Zap, zap, zap! Boom! The door behind them was being blasted open. We're trapped! Exclaimed Grammy. I have an idea, said Alfred. Follow me! He climbed onto the banister and began sliding down as fast as he could go. Whoosh! One by one, the three old dears followed. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! Whee! Exclaimed Enid. This is fabulous, added Agatha. My body is hotty, hollered Grammy, and I like it. The royal guards fired their weapons up at them. Zap, zap, zap! But they were going so fast that they were impossible to hit. Instead, plaster exploded from the walls. Boom, boom, boom! The guards at the bottom of the stairs didn't stand a chance. Whack! Alfred flew, slap bang into them, knocking them over. Clonk, clonk, clonk! Thud, thud, thud! The three old ladies stepped over them as they raced out the clock tower and back into the Houses of Parliament. Retracing their steps, they twisted and turned along the maze of hallways into the chamber until they finally reached the smashed window through which they had entered. Go, go, go! Ordered the old queen, making sure she was the last to leave. The four slid down the rope and landed back onto the bow of the HMS Sceptre. We did it, Grammy, said the boy. You did it, Alfred, she replied. Now, to the tower! But just as they were hurrying back inside the submarine, Something parted the black clouds in the sky and loomed over them. It was the airship. "Oh no!" said Alfred. A flurry of laser shots rained down from above. Zap, zap, zap! The old queen was hit in the back. "Ah!" she cried as she fell face forward into the black water. Splash! "No!" screamed Alfred. Chapter 38. Life and Death. Grammy was floating face down in the water. Alfred rushed to the side of the submarine as laser blast after laser blast scorched the hull of HMS Scepter from the airship above. Zap, 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 zap! Boom, 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 boom! "Grammy!" he cried as he tried to slide down into the water to reach her. Enid yanked him back. "I know you love her, but you can't help her now," she implored. "Get inside before you're blasted to pieces too." "No!" cried the boy. Zap, 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 zap! Boom, 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 boom! "You are coming with me!" ordered Enid as she dragged Alfred inside the submarine as laser blasts rained down all around them. "Grammy!" Zap, 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 zap! Boom, 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 boom! Once inside, HMS Scepter lurched off as the speed as more laser blasts hit the hull. Zap, zap, zap! Boom, boom, boom! Tears rolled down Alfred's face. "I can't believe Grammy's gone," he sobbed. "The old queen died how she would have wanted to," spluttered a tearful Agatha. "A hero." "Much better to die a hero than to live as a coward," remarked Enid, choking back her tears. "Shot in the back," said Alfred. "But with her head held high," continued the distraught Enid. "The best way we can honour her now is to complete her mission. We must save the country. I speak for all us ladies when I say we will serve you now, Prince Alfred. We await your orders, sir." They all looked to the boy. Alfred took a deep breath. He was not ready for this. Not ready at all. He was only 12, and still in his pyjamas. But now was the moment for him to embrace his destiny. "To the tower!" All the old ladies rushed to their posts on the submarine. Alfred stood up, dried his eyes on his sleeve, and resumed his position by the periscope. It took all his strength just to stand there, and not collapse to the floor with grief. He had never felt more broken. "Is the target in sight, sir?" asked Agatha. "Yes, the Tower of London is in sight," replied the boy. "Shall we load the torpedo?" said Enid. Alfred looked down the orb, ready to be wheeled into position. He hesitated. His mother was still locked in the tower. "Are you positive that this thing isn't going to blow the whole place to smithereens?" "It's just a hole, sir," replied Enid. "A big one, but a hole. It is meant to take down a destroyer, not a city." "And all the prisoners would have heard the 13 chimes," added Agatha. "They know it is coming. What would you like us to do, sir?" For the first time in his life, Alfred realised that life and death was in his hands. The responsibility of being a prince and a leader of men, or rather old ladies, was upon him. "Load the torpedo!" he ordered. The ladies in waiting struggled with the weight of it, and Alfred went to help him. Just like the submarine itself, the torpedo dated back to World War I. It was battered and cracked, and Alfred wondered whether it would go off. It was 200 years old, after all. Lifting it from the cradle, Agatha cried out, "Oh, my back's gone!" The torpedo slipped out of her hands, just as it was about to smash onto the floor, and goodness knows what. Kaboom! Alfred took the extra weight just in time. "Phew!" exclaimed Enid. "Phew indeed," agreed the boy. With great care, the torpedo was loaded into the tube. "Orb is ready to launch," announced Agatha. Alfred gulped before making the announcement. "Fire!" Then nothing happened. Nothing at all. Not a sausage. Nothing. "Sorry," said Agatha. "I think I left the safety catch on." She flicked the switch. Click. Oh dear, right. "Ready! Fire!" commanded Alfred again. This time he could feel something was happening. The entire submarine rattled. Then, bang! The torpedo shot from the cylinder. Through the periscope, Alfred could make it out, surging down the river. Whoosh! Before, kaboom! It hit the Tower of London and exploded in an instant. The ancient building was in flames. Smoke billowed across the river. Through it, Alfred could make out figures diving into the water below. To the surface! He ordered. As soon as the submarine had ascended, Alfred raced up the ladder and leaped onto the hull. He was desperate to spot his mother in amongst all the prisoners leaping from the burning building into the River Thames. Splish! Splash! Splosh! Most were swimming to the far side of the river. Alfred spotted a figure behind the others. He remembered his mother could not swim very well. He plunged into the water. Splosh! And swam over to her. Mama! He cried. Lionheart! I knew you'd save me, she replied. Bobbing into the water, she held him close. I love you, he said. I love you too. The Queen held her son even tighter, and their heads went under the water. Blob, blob, blob. You nearly drowned me, exclaimed Alfred. I'm sorry. I love you so much. Come on, said Alfred. He took her hand and together they swam towards the submarine. When they reached the relative safety of the vessel, he heaved themselves onto it. Where is Grammy? Asked his mother, looking around. Alfred shook his head. He couldn't bear to say it. Gone? She asked. The boy nodded his head. No! Tears welled in the Queen's eyes. No! Not dear old Grammy. How did she die? Shot in the back. I am sorry. I know how much you loved her. Oh, I did. I really did. And I know how much she loved you. There will never be a part of Grammy inside you. Never forget that. I won't, Mama. Just then, a small voice in the water cried out. Don't forget about me! Alfred squinted to make out who it was. Might! He cried. Together, he and the Queen hauled her out of the water. Thanks, said the little girl. I thought I was a goner. Laser blasts began exploding all around them. Zap, 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 zap. Boom, 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 boom. The three held on tight to the hull as HMS Scepter powered away from the blazing Tower of London. Alfred saluted. Goodbye, Grammy, he said as her body drifted down the river. Chapter 39. Limb from Limb. All along the riverbank, people came out of their hiding places. They had heard the 13 bongs of Big Ben. They were ready for revolution! On seeing the submarine surging among the Thames, with Union Jack flying from its hull, cheers went up across London. Hooray! The poor, the hungry, the homeless. Now was their time to fight back against the evil regime that had kept them from living in fear for so long. They waved their own Union Jack flags high in the air. With a loudspeaker, the Queen spoke from the hull of a submarine. It is time for the Lord Protector evil dictatorship to end. We will tear down the flag of the Griffin and replace it with the flag of our great nation. Hooray! A portly man of Indian descent called out from the riverbank. He was waving a severely out-of-date bag of marshmallows and shouting, Anybody looking for a special offer on some delicious marshmallows? It was future Raj. He was exactly the same as normal Raj, but his confectionery was even more out of date. Smile and wave, dear, prompted the Queen. Smile and wave. That's what us royals do. Alfred, not being used to being out in public, did as his mother said, even though it felt a bit silly. Zap, zap, zap! It felt even sillier when more laser blasts from the airship above hit the submarine. Boom, boom, boom! The Lord Protector's flying machine was chasing them. Quickly! Inside! Now! Shouted the boy, and he held his mother's and Mite's hands and let them down inside HMS Scepter to safety. The ladies in waiting found blankets for the two new arrivals and wrapped them up tight. The last time I saw you, Nanny was taking you to the palace before to get some chocolate, began Alfred. How did you end up getting locked in the Tower of London? The little girl was shivering with cold. I didn't get no chocolate. No, I waited and waited. Then next thing I know, the room is full of guards. The Queen began listening to the conversation. That's strange, said Alfred. Is it? Asked Mite. Did the little girl know something he didn't? Yes, joined in the Queen. It is strange. Nanny has been in the royal household for all her working life. She looked after my little Lionheart here. With that, she looked lovingly at her son and stroked his hair. Alfred glowed with embarrassment that his mother was doing this in front of the girl. I don't trust her one bit, said Mite. The boy went deep into his mind. There were some things about Nanny that were hard to explain. Why did he feel so much better now that he wasn't eating her eggy weggy every morning? Why did Nanny insist on locking him in his bedroom? Why did she not believe him about the statue of the griffin being used in the ritual, even when he found his father's blood on it? As quickly as Alfred had these thoughts, he dismissed them. Nanny was cared for him since he was a baby. The king before him too. There was no way she could be involved in the Lord Protector's evil plans. The last Alfred had heard, the wicked man was interrogating her. Where to, Captain? Asked Enid, waking the boy from his daydream. Buckingham Palace, replied the prince. Full speed ahead. We must get there before all of London does. Oh, goodness, yes, agreed the Queen. I fear the angry mob will tear my husband limb from limb. They will blame the king for this tyrannical rule, and the real villain, the Lord Protector. We must save the king, called out the prince. Full speed ahead to the palace, shouted Agatha. Alfred took his place at the periscope. Looking through it, he spied platoons of royal guards, taking positions on Westminster Bridge. If the gang tried to disembark from the submarine, at that point, there would be a massacre. Blast, said the prince. We're not going to be able to get close to the palace. It's impossible, agreed the Queen. There were murmurs of agreement from the old dears. Mite spoke up. It's not impossible. I know a way. You don't mean, began Alfred. The tube's tunnel I swam up, exclaimed the girl. But would a submarine fit? It should do, she replied. The old thing is just about the same size as one of the old tube trains. I just need to show you the place where the tunnel meets the Thames. Enid unrolled a map of London, and Mite began trying to make sense of it all. Finally, she pointed to a spot and said, There! Right opposite the London Eye! The ladies all gathered around to study the map. There, deep under the water level, is a giant hole. It must have been created by an explosion. That's the way into the tube tunnel. All the old dears shook their heads. What? Demanded Mite. You can't pilot a submarine up the Piccadilly line, exclaimed Enid. If it's wide enough, then why not? Asked Alfred. Otherwise, it will be nothing but target practice for the Royal Guards. That's a big if, muttered Agatha. Look, began Alfred, we don't have time to argue about this. For all we know, the Griffin could be about to destroy all of London. There were mutters of agreement from all the ladies in waiting. The prince is right, said Enid. Ladies, began Agatha, let's do this. To your stations, commanded Alfred. That's my boy, the Queen proclaimed proudly. In moments, HMS Sceptre was surging through the water towards the entrance of the tube tunnel. Using an ancient radar, beep, 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 the exact location of the hole was found. It was just wider than HMS Sceptre herself. Expert navigation was needed to prevent the submarine from becoming jammed. If HMS Sceptre did become stuck, they would all die a slow and painful death. Hold tight, ladies, called out the prince. We're going in. Dump. The submarine shuddered as it scraped the side of the entrance to the tunnel. All eyes turned to the prince, who was trying his best to keep his cool. Crunch! Another knock. Hold her steady, he ordered. Enid held the steering wheel tightly, sweat pouring from her brow. Agatha mopped it up with a lace handkerchief. Dunk! Another hit. Hold her steady. The submarine began passing up the tube tunnel herself. Hurrah! shouted the ladies. The plan was working. HMS Scepter edged closer and closer to the palace. Then, crunch! The submarine lunged to a halt. Horror upon horror. They were stuck. Backwards! ordered the prince. There was a deafening grinding noise. Grrr! But the submarine didn't budge. Crunch! Forward! Again, there was nothing but an ear-splitting noise. Grrr! Crunch! Backwards! Grrr! Crumph! It didn't move an inch. Then, in an instant, the submarine was plunged into darkness. The lights on board had failed. They were doomed. That's the end of this chapter, folks. If you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe. And keep tuned for the next video. Bye!